it's an old school power panel. Ben Mankiewicz, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian.
Hi.
Hey, almost the oldest host we have. That's not an insult. That's just to mean the ones that have been here the longest.
You started young. How old were you when you started?
20.
She was 13 when she started, right?
Sure.
Man.
All right, look, let's put it a nicer way. It's the A team.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Let's do that.
Okay,
that's
it's the
fun.
A team. All right.
Okay.
And we're on for the whole 2 hours together, isn't it?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
look at that. All right. And on also a Sirius Satellite
I'm not
Radio.
sending a text. I'm looking up something for our first story.
Yeah, so when I was in New York, I was on a couple of other Sirius Satellite Radio shows on the same channel, and Dino Badala's show and Mark Thompson's show. So everybody check those out too. Those are fun.
Number of people in radio named Mark Thompson. Higher. Yeah.
Yes, 17.
Yeah.
Higher or lower? Higher.
There are many.
So it's not our Mark Thompson.
It's not our Mark Thompson.
Never our Mark Thompson.
Yeah. There are many, many Mark Thompsons. Anyway, although Mark's a lovely guy, and hence, and I've known him a long time, could be our Mark Thompson.
Yeah, sure.
Doesn't have to be.
I'm not
doesn't
Mark Thompson.
happen to be here. Okay. Anyways, I just want to quickly note for the record the Bernie shirt I'm wearing, which is kind of awesome. Bernie So Punk. Is it going to be relevant in 2020? I don't know. Are you going to be one of the first people to have it? No, because a lot of people have it from 2016, but you would be among those folks.
When is he going to start doing something? To get involved. I mean, stop just talking and start doing something. That's what I want.
Yeah, that's a good point. This used to be for the presidential race. This now could be for Medicare for all. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. By the way, my new favorite shirt, I just didn't want to overwear it on air, is Rosa Parks Resist. Okay, the original resistor. Okay. I don't know. I just love this.
She was the original resistor?
Well, I don't know about original. We might do a Thomas Jefferson one, but anyway, she didn't. It certainly did resist. ShopTYT.com to get all that fun stuff. Okay, we got a crazy show ahead for you guys. So we got the healthcare stuff. We got the Russians on Facebook. We've got free speech. Is it yes? Is it no? And one of my favorite stories is GOP donors and how they're leading the proceedings behind the scenes on the GOP healthcare proposal. Casper, go.
All right. Will Mitch McConnell bring the Graham-Cassidy healthcare replacement bill to a vote? That is the question people are asking today after it turns out that John McCain made a very transparent, very overt statement regarding what he plans on doing with his vote. He will not vote in favor of the Graham-Cassidy replacement plan. Let me give you some more details on that. He said, and this is a statement by John McCain, I cannot in good conscience vote for the Graham-Cassidy proposal. I believe we could do better working together, Republicans and Democrats, and have not yet really tried. Nor could I support it without knowing how much it will cost, how it will affect insurance premiums, and how many people will be helped or hurt by it without a full Congressional Budget Office score, which won't be available by the end of the month. We won't have reliable answers to any of those questions. So, John McCain is firm in his decision, and keep in mind that the reason why Senate Republicans are rushing to vote on this legislation is because after September 30th, they will need more than a simple majority in order to pass. And so, McCain's decision means the bill doesn't appear to have the votes to pass because Senator Rand Paul has said that he's opposed to it, and also Senator Susan Collins from Maine has said she's leaning against it as well. So it doesn't look like they're going to have the votes necessary.
Okay, so first of all, Rand Paul is against the bill because it's not conservative enough. He'd like to kick more people off of health care, just to be absolutely clear. And McCain couldn't be clearer that he's not going to vote for it. So if you knock out 3 Republicans, they definitely don't have the vote. So it looks like it's over, but Ben, is it really over?
Yeah, so it's funny because you have Rand Paul has been a solid no throughout because he thinks it retains too much of Obamacare, essentially what you said, Jake. And Susan Collins is leaning against it. That's our best bet. The only person who I'm positive will vote no is Susan Collins. Rand Paul is they'll tweak it. or something. There's something that he voted for the other one, right? Now, they aren't the same. I got it. This is a different way of doing it, and Rand Paul particularly objects to this way of doing it. And John McCain, I sent a text around to Cenk and a couple other guys that I wanted action. I wanted $10. That I'm not saying that he'll vote for it, but that now that he's said this no, which as you said is really, there's no ambiguity in the statement, but he'll equivocate because at some point in the next week, he'll say, well, if we could get a rush score, I want to see it. I understand. It turns out we did reach out to Joe Manchin, and that's encouraging. It shows some bipartisan. Like, he'll say something that puts him maybe back in play. He still might vote no at the end, but my hunch is he'll equivocate.
I think that there's one thing or one person that John McCain hates more than the Affordable Care Act, and that's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He hates Donald Trump. Look,
well, he could have taken it down to the wire again, but I guess he wouldn't do that to his... he might vote against his friends, but he wouldn't vote for Lindsey Graham.
I forget that they're buddies.
So he was saying to Lindsey Graham, like, okay, I would like to do this at the last second again. but you're my friend, so I'm just telling you now, I'm not there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it.
So, the reason that Lindsey Graham is one of the sponsors is to get John McCain's vote. They're the best friends in the Senate.
And Lindsey Graham's lifelong commitment to healthcare policy. Don't forget that.
That's a good one. So, and the donors really, really want this. That's a different story. But and part of the reason is that people just never talk about the other part of the bill where it gives hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts to the rich.
Our network voraciously opposed Medicaid expansion in state after state. Tim Phillips, head of the Koch-founded nonprofit Americans for Austerity, told GOP donors last June these Republicans who expanded Medicaid were flatly wrong, so we're to continue holding these Republicans accountable.
So, in other words, give me the tax cuts, God damn it. What did I pay all you guys to be my representatives, if you will? Yeah. And so, that leads to the reason I bring that up is it leads to my part of my theory about John McCain, which is connected to my overall theory about U.S. politics, which is that he's definitely not going to run again.
Yeah.
And now he's untethered from the donors.
I love it.
And the minute you're untethered from the donors, all of a sudden, you can vote your conviction. You can vote the right way. And I think that's partly what's happening here.
What I don't understand, and this gets to what would ultimately be our long theoretical conversation about the influence of money in politics, not the insidious role. We 100% agree there, but the direct influence of doing the donors' bidding. Didn't Bernie Sanders' campaign, Barack Obama's campaign teach these guys, like, you don't need money from everybody. You can raise money elsewhere, right? Like,
no,
that's
it definitely did not.
It didn't teach them, but I mean, I'm not. I don't think I'm wrong, and maybe Bill Cassidy can't raise money that way because he looks like a clown who just has yet to put the makeup on.
Well, so that's that's an excellent description of Bill Cassidy, and I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel would agree. Well, look, there's two different dynamics at play here. One is Bernie Sanders ran for president, and so that you get a ton of free media. Bill Cassidy and others that are running in race in Louisiana are not going to get free media, so they need the donor money. They think they need the donor money to win. The second part, and that's somewhat true, the second part of that is that they can't go get small donors because they don't do anything for small donors. So Bernie Sanders could replace large donors with small donors because he was actually serving the voters. Cassidy has never done that in his career. None of these Republicans have ever done that in their career. So they couldn't possibly raise the kind of small donor money they need. Now, did anyone learn a lesson from Bernie Sanders' campaign? Yeah, I did. So that's why we started Justice Democrats, who is relying only on small donors.
I hear you, and there's great truth to what you said. Yes, it's certainly true that. But the fact of the matter is that whoever Bill Cassidy runs against, whatever Democrat he ends up running against, although in Louisiana he's likely to run against a Republican. These guys, all of these guys, Lindsey Graham, many of these voters will vote because they'll be afraid of the communist who he's running against, whether it's a Hillary Clinton disciple or whether it's a Bernie Sanders disciple. The messaging will be the same, right? That they're dangerous and they're red and they're out of step and they're going to socialize your world. So you can raise money off that. Even if the fact of the matter is, you're not actually delivering policy that will end up helping those people, but you can still do it. I'm struck by, you see the untethered feel of a politician who isn't bound to anybody. It's got to be free.
Maybe worth more debt
I'm surprised there are.
because yet another one of his possessions are going on sale.
Yeah.
The vehicle that Tupac died in is going on sale for a whopping $1.5 million.
Will have an impact of greater freedom in the years ahead.
Well, look,
Assuming that there's no massive change in campaign finance.
I think it's happening right now. It's just happening on the Democratic side. I don't. Republicans are going to be a lot more reluctant to do it because their whole party's based on donors and serving them. But I talked to a candidate earlier today, which obviously I can't disclose, thinking about doing the same thing. Ro Khanna, obviously, no corporate PAC money anymore. He's a just Democrat. Beto O'Rourke is not, but he doesn't take corporate PAC money either. I think there's now 6 people in Congress who said, no, I'm not taking corporate PAC money. I'm done with it. It's a small trend, but it's a trend, and it has begun. It's so far only Democrats.
So let's talk a little bit about public opinion in regard to the latest attempt to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Public policy polling spoke to a representative sample of Americans, and it turns out that it is not a popular piece of legislation. Let's go to graphic 4. Only 24% of Americans support the Graham-Cassidy legislation. The health care bill Republicans are furiously whipping to pass ahead of September 30th. Only 20% of those polled said that they thought the bill would cover more Americans. So it's just as unpopular as the past proposals. And, it's interesting because right now the Senate GOP is catching heat from all sides, right? So they're catching heat from the donors who want their tax cuts. They're catching heat from their constituents who do not like this legislation. They do like the Medicaid expansion. They do like some of the protections, like the protection regarding pre-existing conditions that the Affordable Care Act provided for them. Now, sure, during the Obama administration, everyone wants to go ahead and hate Obama and talk about how much they hate Obamacare. But when push comes to shove, the majority of Americans actually do like and appreciate the protections that it offers.
Yeah, so to be fair, they did at one point bottom out at 17%. So one of their health care proposals was slightly more unpopular.
And the reason why this one is higher is because it hasn't been scored.
Yeah.
Right, when the score comes in and it says 28 to 32 million, probably 32 million Americans will lose their health coverage, by 2026. Well, then it'll have the same atrocious score that every other bill, except of course in Alaska, where everybody will keep the Affordable Care Act coverage because this bill would allow Alaska the way to get them to defeat Obamacare is by tantalizing them by allowing a state to entirely keep Obamacare
to get Lisa Murkowski's vote, which they need. So let's talk about the vector that we use to figure out if something's going to be popular or unpopular. Okay, so there's a vector. The vector. So there's a couple of factors here to consider. One is propaganda, and the other is reality. Now, in an issue where there is almost no reality, propaganda can overwhelm. So, for example, when Republicans scare their voters about Sharia law, well, there's no reality to that, so the propaganda can work completely. So it's never going to touch their personal lives. So they can be like, oh my God, the Sharia law is coming, and I'm in a panic, and we got to make sure we defeat it, and I hate those guys, and it becomes an issue of identity, etc. But when you have an issue like healthcare, which is very real, your family's either going to have healthcare or it's not going to have healthcare. It's either going to cover certain things or it's not. You're either going to pay a certain number or you're not. And depending on those numbers, someone in your family might die. It's the only thing in play is not just reality. There's also still overwhelming propaganda, but that propaganda is at least met by reality in a clash. And so in this case, no matter how much propaganda they did, oh, Bob, I can't, I got him. That's connected to a black guy. Did you know that? Okay. And etc. And look, it's not, even if it's not racial, just a demagoguing about death panels and all the things that they did. Okay, but so that worked. That worked to make Obamacare underwater, less than 50% popularity for a long, long time.
Throughout the Obama administration.
Yeah. Now, though, it has hit a wall of reality where people are saying, wait, okay, you got me to hate Obamacare because I didn't really quite understand it. Like the version in Kentucky, by the way, they actually love. And Mitch McConnell campaigned pretending to be in favor of it. But they just called it something else for propaganda purposes, right? But now when they see the alternative, and the alternative is, no, you're not going to get health care. And if you're a senior citizen, we're going to charge you like 4 or 5 times more. what? Okay, and it's going to cover less stuff, and then 20, 30 million people are not going to have health care anymore. They're like, I mean, yeah, the other guy was black, but I really want my health care.
Yeah.
And I know you said the other guy had death panels, but without the health care, I'm going to die. So that kind of sounds like a death panel to me. So it's just too much reality in this case for the propaganda to overwhelm it. Hence, 20% is miserable.
Yeah, and you got, and they're attempting to, they're going on television and they're talking it up and they're arguing with Jimmy Kimmel. We've reached a very strange point. I was talking to Michael Shore today, my brother actually, today, and they, in 1977, if Johnny Carson had argued with a Republican senator with Alan Simpson, right, in 1977, or Howard Baker in 1977, about health care, and one guy going on Meet the Press and then Carson going on his show and arguing, we would have thought, that's ridiculous, Johnny, you're a comedian on late night television. Do your interviews with Burt Reynolds and move along. Burt Reynolds was a movie star.
He's the dude with the mustache,
right? And stay out of this lane, which is the line they're using now all the time. Jimmy Kimmel's wife, who's the head writer on the show, had a great tweet. She said, "No, after what we've been through, it's our lane. Look out, we're merging."
Oh, that's a great line.
Get it.
She's the head writer on Kimmel's show. They've been married.
No wonder.
But it would have been absurd. Whereas now we've entered into a place where, when I saw the headline from many on the right, the tweets from many on the right, how ridiculous is it that Jimmy Kimmel was arguing with Bill Cassidy? And I thought, I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel knows far more about healthcare than Bill Cassidy.
Why would it be ridiculous?
Because he went through it, so he had a crisis with his child. He is an empathetic human being, and he talked to other parents, and he talked to doctors and nurses, and at some point they asked, hey, what if we didn't have this great insurance from Disney? And they went, well, then, and he was like, oh my God, that's horrible. And they're like, but you can people get covered now. And so he's like, oh, it's great, right? Because he's a normal, and he has some, and he read in, and he cared about it. And I'm certain he cares more about it, because Bill Cassidy, in every appearance he has, indicates he doesn't even know what's in the bill that has his name on it.
That's right, yeah.
So, going along with that, the other part is that's different from 1977 is that, it was far from perfect. I'm not idealizing the good old days. But there was an actual intellectual debate and principal debate from time to time about some issues. Now, all the debates are littered with lies.
That's right.
And so when Cassidy and Lindsey Graham talk about, oh my God, we're going to help the red states here, and the blue states have been ripping you off, people then go, wait a minute, though. It's the only reason the blue states are getting more money now is because they signed up for what was available. And some of the people who debunk that Republican line is other Republicans who are governors of states like Ohio and Michigan and go, no, we signed up for it because the federal government is helping to take care of our citizens, which we thought was a huge win. So when you say that we're unduly getting money in Ohio and Michigan, led by Republican governors, that's not true. That's just a lie. And so when you go around pretending that, hey, you know what, these red states are going to be way better off because the blue states were ripping off, the second part of that equation is also not true. The red states are not going to be better off. They're eventually going to have their Medicaid cut. That's a fact.
And the Republican governors, like in my home state of Maryland, Larry Hogan, governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan took the money. Right, and then they took the money in Ohio, right? Because it was the only lie. Because turning down the money was just spiteful. It was just an attempt to say Obamacare's not coming here,
right.
And the people who suffer for it were the poorest people and the neediest people in your state. That's all it was. And so there are, and many of these Republican governors, as Jag said, have come out now, and so whether it's a traditionally blue state like Maryland or an actual red state like Alaska. And they're like, well, actually, no.
Yeah, and even some
I'm right about Alaska. Didn't the governor of Alaska say?
Yeah. Yep. They were trying to woo him, but at the end he was like, no, I know you're trying to entice me with more money, but what you're saying is just not true. Right. And by the way, administrators in even the deepest red states say, no, they aren't going to cut Medicaid. I mean, look, maybe we were in favor of it because we're Republicans and we're awesome, but and it's awesome to cut Medicaid, but they are in fact going to cut Medicaid. So so they're lying. So it's a different dynamic. That's what leads to the frustration of someone like Jimmy Kimmel going, wait a minute, that's just not remotely true. And Johnny Carson, I don't think would have been in a situation to burst out like that, because it was just a different dynamic. And finally, speaking of different dynamics, now that they've seen the alternative, Obamacare polling at 54%, above water, more than 50% popular, is gaining in popularity every single day. They're like, well, I mean, they told me Obamacare was bad. They didn't tell me that their proposal was way, way worse. Given that, I want pre-existing conditions covered. Obamacare not so bad.
And look, man, if we lived in an any way civilized political environment, Obamacare has problems, right? Many of those problems brought on by the states that wouldn't take the Medicaid money, but also in areas where there isn't any competition, right? So then there'd be a civilized, normal debate, the kind that we had at times in 1977, about buttressing it, about making it better and fixing those problems. Which, by the way, everyone involved with Obamacare, everyone who launched it, everyone who thought would happen, right? I mean, it would have been the most, if Obama was president, he'd be like, great, yes, fix those problems.
All right, I lied. I'm going to say one super last thing. Okay, you know what's polling at 3 times the rate of the Republican proposal? Medicare for All, at 60%. More popular than Obamacare, and 3 times as popular as the Republican proposals.
Can I say one thing? Because I think I had a good idea, and I don't have a lot of them. And it involves reading my last tweet, but it's significant because so my thought was this: is that Donald Trump, anytime he tweets about anything having to do with the ACA, right, and repealing it, and his last one was Rand Paul, or whoever votes against the health care bill, will forever be known as the Republican who saved Obamacare, right? So then you subtweet that, and you write essentially what I wrote here, which is the open enrollment period to sign up for the ACA health insurance for 2018 starts November 1st, 2017, and runs through 12/15, and then link to the open enrollment, which I actually didn't do, but I will when I do it again. Like, because Trump cut by 90% advertising for that very fact. Part of that is getting people, because it literally doesn't want people to sign up to get health care. So they cut that for 90%. So if we could take any time Donald Trump mentions it, and then use that to just remind people, hey, you want to sign up for 2018? And it's probably still going to be there because Graham Cassidy may be dead now. Here's how to do it. Here's the link to do it. I think it'd be a really effective way to combat Donald Trump if thousands and thousands of people did.
All right, sounds good.
All right, let's talk about the donors a little more because I have some details that the audience should know about. The New York Times has uncovered a story involving GOP donors and how furious they are with the GOP for failing at passing anything legislatively that would, of course, benefit these very donors. Now, the Graham Cassidy healthcare bill is the latest example, but these donors are trying to make sure that they do get their tax cuts in upcoming debates that are likely to happen. Now, Senator Cory Gardner, during a recent meeting with GOP senators, mentioned something about these donors, and I want to share it with you. Campaign fundraising was drying up, he said, because of the widespread disappointment among donors over the inability of the Republican Senate to repeal the Affordable Care Act or do much of anything else. He was quoted as saying, "Donors are furious. We haven't kept our promise."
That is the most telling quote in all of politics, because the Republicans keep saying, well, you know, we made a promise to our voters and that we would repeal Obamacare, and so we're going to have to deliver on that promise. Chuck Grassley is talking about that, etc. And you're like, wait a minute, though, your proposal is polling at 20%, so it doesn't seem like a lot of Americans are on your side, including Republicans, including your voters. So wait, who did you make that promise to? And here is the Republican senators clarifying, no, we didn't mean voters. We made a promise to our donors.
Right, and there's an interesting thing happening right now because everyone's angry with the GOP, with these particular senators, because on one hand you have the constituents who, you know, even if they lean to the right, they're aware of what's going on, which is why the Graham Cassidy legislation is polling at about 24% approval, right? And so constituents don't want it, but then donors want their tax cuts. And so, you know, they're obviously conflicting here, But for the first time in a long time, I feel like constituents are politically aware, and there will be consequences for those who vote in favor of this legislation. I want to skip ahead to something else Gardner said that I thought was super interesting. Mr. Gardner did not specifically urge approval for the so-called Graham-Cassidy health proposal that the Senate may vote on next week. At the time of this meeting, that plan seemed essentially dead. So it seems like the Senate GOP has already decided, like, yeah, this doesn't look good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue with that. He was seen as speaking more generally and mainly looking forward to the coming debate over tax cuts.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from somebody that in the GOP caucus, the Trump's tax cut plan was gaining steam. I was like, hey man, I think it's got it. I don't think we needed to gain steam. I don't know why this feels bungled to me. Obviously, it's bungled because they didn't repeal the Affordable Care Act, and obviously at one point or many points, McConnell thought he could in some variation, but they probably should have started with the tax cuts. Yeah,
I guess.
And maybe there's some reason why.
I'll tell you why they didn't.
I just thought it was.
Okay, so what is not talked about enough and is very relevant to this story about the donors is that $600 to $700 billion in tax cuts are put into repealing Obamacare.
That's right.
So it's like our Republican donors, like the Koch brothers or Cory Gardner, talks about how he's got a big donor in Colorado who's mad at him. Oh my God, it's so obvious they just work for them. They're servants. It's so pathetic. Anyway. So those guys that was like an appetizer. They wanted it's not like those Republican donors as vicious as you might think they are, like, I want to make sure you don't have insurance. They just don't give a damn whether you have insurance or not. They just want their damn tax cuts. So the Trump tax cuts that come afterwards are about $7 trillion. So they're 10 times as much. So what the donors wanted was, give me a nice little appetizer, let me warm up on $700 billion tax cut, then let's move on to the $7 trillion tax cut, because if you do the $7 trillion tax cut first, when you ask for another $700 billion, people might go, oh, come on, right? But that's why they went in the order that they did, but they bungled this one because it affects people's health care.
Right.
And so, but now when they move on to the tax cuts, every Republican will hold because they all work for their donors. The only one now, with my new theory, the only one who could possibly break ranks, not the moderates, not even Collins, Murkowski, not any of those guys. The only one who could possibly break ranks is McCain, because he's definitely not going to run again. So God knows what McCain will do.
Right. Well, also, just keep in mind that, they're not looking out for, the middle class or working class Americans they claim they're looking out for, right? So anytime you hear a Republican, in some cases even, so-called blue dog Democrats talk about these tax cuts, first of all, they refer to it as tax reform. It's not tax reform. The only thing they're focusing on is cutting taxes, period. But they say that, the emphasis is going to be on the middle class. They want to provide more money for you so you can go off and do what you want with your own money and not have so much government involved in your choices. But who are their donors? Their donors aren't, mostly represented by middle-class individuals. They're corporations. They're the wealthiest people. They want to give these tax cuts to the wealthy. So every time you hear someone from the GOP go on CNN and talk about how they're just looking out for the middle class, they want to provide more money for you, that is not the case at all. They're primarily focused on cutting taxes for their donors, who are the wealthiest people.
Yeah, and the plan backs that up. It's just not complicated.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's such a bad trick. I watched a Penn and Teller show last night where it's called like Fool Me Penn and Teller, or Fool Penn and Teller. And magicians get up there and try and do a trick that they haven't seen, and they always know what it is, right? And this is such a bad. They're like, well, it's for the middle class, and then you look at it and you're like, well, 98% of the tax cuts go to the wealthiest 1%.
I know, but look, I agree that on the surface level, it seems like it's a really bad idea. It's very easy to look at the policy and move on with your life and realize they're lying to you. But think about the platforms in which they have these discussions, and think about how these platforms never delve into the policy details, right? And so, look, I'm not just saying this because I suspect CNN doesn't get into the details of the tax cut proposals. I know this because I listen and watch to CNN every day, and when these segments happen, they drive me insane. They'll have some GOP person come on, and he'll say, no, we're just trying to cut the taxes for the middle class. CNN doesn't get into the details of what they're proposing, ever. And that's the thing that frustrates me. So it's actually a very smart strategy, because if you have a politician go on CNN and tell people, oh, middle class, we're going to cut your taxes, and they're not going to get into the truth and talk about what's really going to happen, Americans are going to love that. They're going to be supportive of that.
Yeah, and of course, because since the beginning of time, every normal person would like more money. And every normal person looks at their paycheck and thinks, man, that sucks, right? Right? So it's an incredibly effective strategy, and it's for years and years and years put Democrats in a difficult position because they have to defend something that nobody wants. Everybody wants to keep their money. So you're right. Unless it's broken down and made clear, then it becomes a very effective argument. I'm just saying that when it is broken down, as sometimes it is, it's just such a bad trick. It doesn't hold up. It is a mile wide and an eighth of an inch deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right, Anna. Unfortunately, the cable news complex is so incompetent, and maybe purposely so, that just look up basic facts about what percentage of tax cuts goes to the top 1% or to multinational corporations. And by the way, don't call it tax reform just because they call it tax reform. That you're helping their propaganda. You're supposed to be journalists. You're supposed to figure out, is it actually reform or is it cuts? Now, you can argue that it's reform if it is not overall cutting taxes. It's adding taxes on places and it's cutting taxes on other places. But this one doesn't. It's a $7 trillion tax cut. So don't feed into their propaganda. That's not supposed to be your job. So I was talking to somebody off air today, and they said, I'm beginning to think this is not tax reform. It looks like tax cuts. Of course, that's what it is. I mean, that's insanity. And when they talk about entitlement reform, do you think it's ever an increase of entitlements like Social Security and Medicare? No, entitlement reform means entitlement cuts. So call it what it is. And they won't do it, but it doesn't matter. There's this thing called the internet, and people can actually look it up now, which would be before TV had a monopoly, and they help to manipulate and lie to you. So now they're going to get busted on this stuff. So now look, it's a lot of conservative Democrats are really corporate Democrats. They will also vote for these tax cuts, and they will pass these tax cuts. Otherwise, they're all going to lose their funding, and they cannot have it. That is the only thing they care about. But when they do, there's going to be hell to pay. Because people, they coined this term, trickle-down economics. That is a terrible term. And they let it sit there for decades, and the Democrats, because they're part of the corrupt system, never really challenged it. When they go make the case, I just gave $7 trillion of tax cuts to the rich. But don't worry, it'll eventually trickle all over you. That is not a winning strategy politically.
Yeah, it's never happened. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And so have at it, Hoss, but that is, it's, I know that they need it to get money from their donors, and that's part of the corrupt system, but it is going to be their ultimate demise, because people are no longer happy to get trickled on, and it's not going to be a winning strategy. Okay, we got to take a break, right?
Yes, let's take a break. When we come back, an update on what's going on with North Korea, and then later on in the show, hopefully we get to the story about drone strikes under Trump, because it is bananas.
Yeah, and the North Korea story is potentially disastrous. It might seem like the same old yelling at each other, but there's actually a really important difference in what just happened today. We'll explain when we come back.
There's insanity in the control room tonight.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Ben Jenks and Anna with you guys. We just played a little clip of my friend Loris O'Donnell for a second there. Tony R. Casillo won on YouTube Super Chat. Said, I think my boy O'Donnell is upset and stressed because of his contract. Have they come to an agreement on his future with MSNBC? I hope he will be okay. The Irish temper is real. Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
Someone in that control room is out of control.
I mean, if that's representative of Irish temper, then I want to be around Irish people all the time.
Yeah. Anyway, by the way, just to answer your question, they did. He got the contract.
Oh, okay, good. I felt bad for a second.
No,
that was like a couple months ago. He got it.
Okay.
Yeah,
He played it well.
Oh, he played it brilliantly. Great piece of politics by Lawrence O'Donnell in a good way. All right, Lentil Soup says, I hope the A-team is on more often. Thank you. And D-More315 says, motherfucking Ben Mankiewicz. I've missed Ben on the show and on What the Flick. Love to see him back.
Yeah, I've been busy. Not intentional, just life.
So people come up to me, especially when I'm in New York, because I'm walking through New York and there's a lot of folks. And one guy came up and said, I was at a pizza shop, and he's like, you're the guy from the Young Turks, right? I said, yeah. He said, okay, I don't watch you, but he said, but I'm obsessed with What the Flick. So tell Ben, Matt, and Christy I said hi.
So this happens to me a fair amount now. I was at an airport, and this family comes up to me, right? This guy stops me, and I'm running. I'm late. I got there like 29 minutes before the flight, but I'm all like I do Clear now, where you do the little fingerprint readout, which I know is going to come back to bite me one day. Yeah. Like I'm going to spend like 37 days in, Homeland Security solitary confinement because of it. But right now, it's good. And so I make it, and I'm walking, but I'm still like I'm walking fast to get to my gate. So she goes, oh my God, I can't believe I'm seeing you at the airport, Ben Mankiewicz. And his sister's like, this is Ben Mankiewicz, And he says to his kid, this is my son, his name's Ben too. And, and the kid waves, and he's like, I just would love watching you, love watching you. And I'm like, oh, that's so great. He goes, can we take a picture? I'm like, yeah, sure, take a picture. And I go, I'm so sorry, I got to run, I got a plane leaves in 16 minutes. I go, it's great, so you guys love old movies? Do you watch them together? And he goes, what? I'm like, what? The Young Turks? Love the Young Turks. TYT.
Yeah, it's funny. And then other people will just shout out random hosts. They're like, tell John, he's great. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll tell Big John.
I was at Starbucks today with that Starbucks cup that I had on the set, and as I'm walking out of Starbucks, this guy who was eating outside, and he stops his conversation and he goes, hey man, keep it up, keep up the good work, keep fighting. And I was like, that's not TCM, that's TYT. He never said it, but I knew.
He's like, keep up the good work. Dr. Zhivago. More people must know about him. He's a great doctor.
Maybe that was it.
Okay, all right, let's keep going.
He's a great doctor.
All right.
You've never seen that movie.
No, I did. It's a rare old movie I've seen. Based on your suggestion. Anyway, yes.
All right. Tensions between the United States and North Korea are ramping up, considering Donald Trump's UN speech, where he had some pretty harsh words for North Korea and its missiles tests. Now, we're going to show you a little clip from his speech and then Kim Jong-un's response to it. Take a look.
Now, North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financially support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary.
Okay, it's always incredibly jarring for him to go from totally destroy North Korea and immediately follow it with Rocket Man. Like, it's anyway. But,
no, I got to jump in on that, too. So, actually, the first part of that was fine. He was saying, well, what are you guys doing trading with North Korea when they endanger all these people? I actually totally agree with that. I think it's incumbent upon us to pressure China, and I think they're endangering the world with their relationship with North Korea. So, some of that tough talk is necessary. But he can't help himself. He has to, A, take it over the top with, we will totally destroy you. That's so unhelpful. And I'm coming at it from a person who believes in tough talk. But that's not productive. That's counterproductive for reasons that we're going to explain. And then when you say Rocket Man, no one, I can't ever think of Rocket Man without thinking Rocket Man, right? You sound like an idiot. You sound like a goofy kid, and you destroyed any kind of gravitas you had there with your tough dog by going Rocket Man.
Right, exactly. And so, look,
do you know the words to Rocket Man? Of course.
All I know is Rocket Man.
That doesn't even happen in the song. I gotta be honest.
It kind of does. It kind of does.
All right, so that speech happened, and following Trump's speech, he did put some action behind his words, meaning that he did target some of those countries, China primarily, that do trade with North Korea. And so Trump signed an executive order expanding the authority of the United States and the Treasury Department to target individuals, banks, and other companies that finance or facilitate trade with North Korea. So he essentially beefed up the sanctions that the UN had passed earlier. Now,
maybe you could start by not having the Trump Corporation make all the clothes in China. That might be one of them.
Ooh, that's a great point. But again, when it's just sanctions and it is meant to put pressure on the regime, I agree with that move. That's not necessarily a bad move at all. It's going to get worse, but so if he just left well enough alone, the tough talk and the sanctions and the tough actions is not necessarily a bad thing. It might be a good thing because they do need pressure.
It's not the first time we've talked tough on North Korea. Here we said we might wipe them off the face of the earth.
That's
a little different.
Yeah, that's the difference, and that has unfortunately escalated the situation even further. And now, for the first time, Kim Jong-un has released a statement in the first person. I know that doesn't sound like a big deal to people in the United States, but for North Korea, this is unprecedented.
happened since. And now, all of a sudden, North Korea is saying, yes, we might do one in the atmosphere, and we might try to put it on a long-range missile. Now, remember, they already fired a long-range missile over Japan, and they've shown some competence here, which has surprised me.
2 over Japan, I think.
Yeah, and so, but they're still North Korea. Imagine if they screw up a long-range missile test with a nuke on it, and it falls short. And it falls short in Japan, or South Korea, or God knows where. Then nuclear war. So we boxed them into a corner in a way that was thoughtless. We could have done it in a sophisticated way, and this is why when Bush and Trump say they don't do nuance, it's a terrible idea. It's basically saying, I am stupid, and I see the world in a way that is black and white, and when you do that, you set everyone up for disaster.
But it's also, and it's also why the way Obama handled North Korea was far better. Yeah, we didn't solve the problem, neither has anyone else, but it was contained. We were never at this point. And it's also why, unbelievably, the Republicans managed to elect a guy substantially less qualified for this job than George W. Bush. Because as little nuance as he did, for the most part, the people negotiating with North Korea took it relatively seriously, right? We actually, the diplomatic corps did not completely crumble. They didn't appoint the head of, the Secretary of State wasn't the head of ExxonMobil, a guy who has no interest in this job.
Yeah, and so one of the other things we keep saying is, oh, they can't fire a long-range missile with nukes on it, thereby goading them to try. Yeah, don't do that! That's a really bad idea! And so that's, look, one maniac, and you could perhaps avoid nuclear war. 2 maniacs on opposing sides, that's, again, a recipe for disaster. And then Kim Jong-un said about Trump, he's, quote, a frightened dog barks louder. Okay? And Trump...
Kim Jong-un said that about Trump? That was a perfect example. Trump could have said that about Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, we could play that game all day long. And look, when he would say things like that about Obama, Obama would be like, okay, whatever. Right. The North Korean guy, I don't care, right? In fact, you know what he called Obama? He called him a monkey. And Obama's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm not going to nuclear war because you hurt my feelings.
Right.
Right? But Trump is not that guy. Trump's like, what did he say about me? Oh, yeah, I'll show up. We'll totally destroy you, wipe off the map. And he's like, oh, okay, well, all right, let's get it on. This is just...
We're in a strange position where we're really praying that Nikki Haley saves the day.
Oh.
Or Rex Tillerson. Oh my God.
Well,
anyway,
it would be of those two. It would be Nikki Haley.
Yes. All right. So dotard. What does it mean? A state or period of senile decay marked by decline of mental poise and alertness.
It's like
I feel like it's correct though.
It's an old.
It's accurate.
It's a crazy old person.
Yeah.
But I did you know it was a word?
No, I didn't.
No, I didn't know it was either.
Yeah.
I thought it was, and I thought it was. I'm almost sorry that it's not pronounced dotard because it might. That having it enter the lexicon might have finally killed the other word that ends T-A-R-D. Everybody would have finally let that go as well. They should, and then we could just use.
I know, but unfortunately, it's specifically about older people.
Can you use the example that was given from the New York Times?
Yes.
Okay.
So New York Times went back in their archives to see how many times it had been used since 1980. And it's only 10 times out of all the articles they've ever written since 1980. And one of them said, it was a tale of a dotard husband cuckolded by his young wife.
Charles Pierce of Esquire, who's unquestionably worth following on Twitter, he used it about Trump in May. They wrote about Trump, they called him a dotard. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's Kim Jong-un reads Esquire.
So now I'm going to give you more put-downs by the North Koreans of our different leaders. And some people are like, dotard, kind of a little bit right. Okay, now some, of course, are outrageous and terrible, like calling Obama a monkey. They called Hillary Clinton... So they said she looks like a primary school girl and sometimes a pensioner going shopping. I don't think either one of those things is true. I'm not offended by either one of those things. I just don't think it's quite a match.
Not really insults either.
Right. Yeah, you look like a schoolgirl. Okay.
You look like a pensioner, like somebody who worked hard is living on their pension and has to buy something.
Okay. Right. John Kerry, they said, was a wolf with a hideous lantern jaw.
Oh my god!
Yeah, what kind of nailed it?
Alright, come on.
Okay, sorry. And I like John Kerry, and George Bush, when he ducked the shoe that was thrown at him in '08 in Iraq, they said he looked like a chicken soaked in the rain. Like, that's not bad either. They kind of have a facility with these insults.
God. Man, those reflexes though. That was an impressive video.
But he did kind of look like a chicken soaked in the rain.
That was probably the only time I was impressed by Bush. Anyway.
So, well, it's all fun and games until nuclear war starts. So
it's all fun and games until 1.6 million people get killed.
That's right. And so, in all seriousness, guys, this is the issue that I think is by far the most important, and why I look forward to a President Pence. For all of how outrageous Mike Pence is and how he would be more competent in getting Republican priorities passed, I'll take it in return for no nuclear war, which this buffoon is likely to start. I mean, I don't know that it's at 51% yet, but we are way undercounting how possible it is.
Did you see a story? Did they move the doomsday clock today? I mean, there aren't many. They can't move it a lot closer to midnight. It's like it's already outrageously close to midnight, but this is the kind of thing that could cause them to move it.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we got to take a break. We'll be back.
I got a bunch of things. TYT. Some quick tweets for you guys on hashtag TYT Live. That's what you should use to get in touch with us during the live show, which is, of course, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on TYTnetwork.com or YouTube.com/TYT. And by the way, in order to get us show of the year, the streamings, hashtag TYT for streamies, for as an FOR, spell it out, okay? Hashtag TYT for streamers. If we win show of the year, that would be bananas. That would be great. That's happening on Tuesday. All right, Luis Figueroa says, I thought we were done telegraphing our military strategy. Trump turns out to be a greater fraud each and every day. Great point. Trump always says, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. That would just tip off our opponents. Then he's like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with North Korea. I'm going to destroy them and nuke them. Oh well, there goes that strategy.
Remember that I have a better plan than the generals?
Yeah. Still waiting for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Old Turk writes in, Doter Drumpf. That's the new name. Eric Rooney says, isn't it a god with no butthole? Isn't a god with no butthole just full of shit? Because remember one of the myths
about Kim Jong-un is that they don't. There's no refuge. There's no refuse.
Yeah, he has no anus.
Right. Yeah. So he doesn't.
So that would just make you full of shit. That's a very good point, Eric. Chris Bradshaw says, but her emails.
always funny. Always funny.
All right, Chris, you get a shirt. ShopTYT.com, everybody, unless you could make us laugh on the show. All right, No Way says, quote, substantially less qualified than George W. Bush. Not words you hear very often.
Yeah, I'm stunned by it, but it's unquestionably true.
Yes, that's unbelievable. Yes. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. The Trump administration is considering replacing its travel ban on Muslim-majority countries, some Muslim-majority countries, with a more targeted policy that would impact even more countries. So to give you the details on that, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that rather than ban travel altogether from the nations on the new list, the order is set to create restrictions that vary by country based on cooperation with the United States mandates, the threat posed by each country, and other factors. So let me be clear about one thing before we proceed. There are very few details given to the press by the Trump administration. The only thing that we know so far is that they're considering expanding this travel ban and targeting countries that don't cooperate with us when it comes to things like reporting known terrorists and things like that. So the Department of Homeland Security originally flagged 17 nations, although they haven't told us which 17 nations they flagged, as failing to comply with standards. About half of those 17 nations made changes that brought them into compliance. Now, travelers from one or two more countries could face additional background checks when seeking to travel to the United States, but not a travel ban. Okay, so we don't know what this means at all. Okay, all we know is this is going to impact more countries. We don't know exactly what their standards are going to be in terms of limiting or restricting the travel from these countries. We don't know which countries they're even looking at. We just know that this is in the works.
I hear you on that, but based on the details that we have so far, I'm going to shock the world. I think I agree with the new policy. So let me explain. The old policy was 7 Muslim countries. I don't like them, but we're banning everybody from them. And then they had to take out Iraq because Trump forgot that Iraq's supposed to be an ally because we liberated them. And he's like, oh yeah, oops, I didn't mean Iraq. So that was an incredibly dumb black and white policy that was clearly discriminatory. Now, I don't know if the 17 nations include Muslim and non-Muslim nations. That would make it much better so that it's not discriminatory. But let me tell you the parts that I like about the new potential policy. So if the countries are not working with us in identifying people that we know or believe to be terrorists or criminals, well, that's a significant problem. That's specific. That's something real. That's not like, I don't like Muslims. That's like, hey, guys, we think those guys are terrorists. Can you help us? No, I won't help you. Well, all right, then I won't let people from your country in. And then we want them to use electronic passports with biometrics. I know that has some downsides, but also has some upsides in being able to find people that we're looking for that are bad guys. And countries regularly reporting lost or stolen passports to Interpol. So if we say to Sudan, hey guys, there's all these stolen or lost passports, we're afraid they're going to be used by bad guys. and you report them to Interpol, and they're like, no, screw off. Well, and then we go, okay, well then you screw off. But Trump used sticks as well as carrots, and Obama also was fighting this, so it's not like it's a new thing. Obama was asking for the same things that Trump was. Again, if Trump goes to that same Obama policy, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing, right? But Obama would say, all right, if you don't do it, we're going to take, or if you do it, we're going to give you visa-free travel to the U.S. And instead of a carrot. And Trump is saying, if you don't do it, we're not going to let your citizens come here. That's a stick. I believe in using carrots and sticks. So, you know what happened? It sounds like from the Wall Street Journal story, about 8 out of the 17 nations now are complying. That's a good thing.
Yeah, but it concerns me that they won't disclose which countries they are, and I don't believe the Department of Homeland Security, which is drafting this new policy at the moment. First of all, I don't trust Jeff Sessions. I don't trust what their intentions are. I think that they use the fear-mongering tactic of terrorism and how terrorists are an imminent threat to the United States as a way to pass, discriminatory, hateful legislation and policies like this. I just don't trust them. So if this was, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if this was an administration that had shown, they had a record of showing that they genuinely just care about the safety of Americans and they don't want to do things that are hateful toward groups of people that they've deemed, dangerous, then I'd say, all right, they have our best interests in mind. But I just, they're not being transparent, and I think they're not being transparent for a reason.
Yeah, Jack, you're making a huge mistake. This isn't the first time they're going to do something smart. They're incapable of it. That's not the way that the way that you worry that Trump is going to make such an enormous mistake that it'll significantly harm the economy. You think they figured this out? These are not bright people. These are not professional people engaged in this. Stop calling it a travel ban. You want to get tough on countries that don't cooperate with us in the war on terrorism, then make an announcement that you're going to stop that countries that are not cooperating with us about getting the details of known criminals, that we might make it much harder for people from that country to come here.
So let me jump in. Sorry. So is Saudi Arabia going to be on that list? Doubt it. Is China going to be on that list? I mean, China's helping a dictator and supplying them with whatever's necessary to build, their nuclear capability. But you think that Trump is going to do anything against China? Really do anything against China?
So, but look, the China-North Korea situation is a little bit different. If China is helping find stolen passports and track terrorists and criminals, but they're not helping with North Korea, it's just a separate issue. If we find out that there are non-Muslim nations that are not doing these things, but we let them in anyway, then you guys are 100% right. Mm-hmm. If it only applies to Muslim nations,
that's what he's true. I mean, that's what they want, a political win, and they like scapegoating Muslims. And I'm not pretending that that we don't have an issue with a lot of Muslim majority countries who may not be cooperating with us in a very tangible way that they ought to be cooperating in the war on terror, to borrow their phrase. Then I got no problem with that. I'd be with you that, of course, this is what would happen on a regular basis between the Department of Homeland Security and security officials in countries around the world. Like, hey, we need this cooperation. You don't cooperate, I don't care about using the stick either. I might prevent everyone in your country from coming over. And maybe that'll work, right? But the goal here won't be about coming up with a policy that actually makes people safe. It's inconceivable. That's not what they cared about. That's why we know that they didn't care about it, because of the very nature of the way the first Muslim ban was orchestrated and the countries that were exempt from it.
But the last thing on this, guys, it's possible that we're talking about two different factions within the White House and the administration. So did Trump do the original Muslim ban because he was trying to get biometric information? No. He said it during the campaign, and he said it's a total and complete ban on all Muslims. He did it to get votes from bigots, and it was a Steve Bannon strategy. But this is the Department of Homeland Security, and it might be General McMaster who runs that, who's saying, let me try to make something positive out of something negative. All right, a Muslim ban is disastrous and un-American. I'll turn it into something that's productive, and then I'll tell Trump, oh, this is the ban you were looking for, President Trump. I think that has a decent chance of being true.
Maybe that's another way of looking at it, and if that's true, then okay. But I mean, it would be a rare moment of competency and thoughtfulness and policy awareness from this administration.
And finally,
in an area that the president himself has just demagogued about consistently.
But remember, the Bannons are out, and the Gorkas are out, and those guys. So there's still Stephen Miller. There's still some really bad guys, and there's a bad guy named Trump that's still in office. But some of the competent guys have taken over some of the functions inside the government. Now, that doesn't mean that Trump is going to listen to them. So this could be their plan, and they bring it to Trump, and he goes, "No, I meant just ban Muslims randomly." And he just vetoes it. So that's entirely possible. But if they execute the plan as the Wall Street Journal has it and is reporting it, then it wouldn't be so bad.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I read it, and I thought the same. I thought, well, it has the feel and the sound of competence. But I'm still more with Anna. Like, you're going to have to show me competence a few times before I believe that's going to come about.
Yeah. All right.
I like to say, fool me once, shame on. You won't get fooled again.
All right. So
that guy was smarter.
That's true and incredibly depressing.
yes. All right. While the Trump administration drafts policy that would potentially ban travel from even more countries into the United States because of threats of terrorism, well, turns out that Trump is ramping up, I should say, terrorism in other countries, like Yemen. So let me explain. During the Obama administration, the number of drone strikes that unfortunately ended up killing civilians abroad increased. According to The Atlantic, Obama presided over roughly 10 times as many lethal airstrikes as George W. Bush in covert war on terror operations outside the war zones of Iraq and Afghanistan. Also include Yemen to that list, okay? U.S. strikes in just 3 countries, Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen, killed at least 384 innocent civilians. Now, again, this is under the Obama administration, and it's something that we criticized him for quite a bit. Well, Trump looked at that policy and said, not good enough. Let's do more. In fact, there might be a little too much oversight when it comes to these drone strikes. So let's loosen some of the rules necessary to move forward with even more of these strikes. So the Trump administration is preparing to dismantle key Obama-era limits on drone strikes and commando raids outside conventional battlefields. Okay, so they're going to essentially target lower-level individuals that they suspect of being terrorists or aiding terrorists. The targets of kill missions would be expanded to include foot soldier jihadists with no special skills or leadership roles. Proposed drone attacks and raids would no longer undergo high-level vetting.
Oh, great.
So this is, look, so the reason why I don't believe the Department of Homeland Security in their new policy, they're drafting new policy to do even more travel bans in even more countries because they want to keep us safe, right? If they genuinely cared about keeping us safe, this is the kind of stuff that they would try to, reel back in. But instead, they're expanding what the Obama administration did wrong. They want to do away with anything he did right, but anything he did wrong, they want to expand it. And this leads to way more hostility toward the Western world, okay? If your family gets murdered and the U.S. government refers to them as collateral damage, how easy is it for ISIS to recruit you? It's just such dumb foreign policy, right? And so if you're worried about terrorists abroad, your travel bans are cute, but you need to really rethink this foreign policy that has failed us time and time again.
So from time to time, people will say, oh yeah, Trump's doing this, but did you know that Obama also did it? And did you criticize him when he did it? Yeah, we did. We most certainly did. And so Obama's team would claim that their strikes were, quote, exceptionally surgical and precise. And that was nonsense, and we called it the nonsense that it was over and over again. Anna gave you the 384 innocent civilians killed at least. That's the low end. It is potentially as high as 807 civilians killed. If that's surgical and precise, Jesus, what's butchery? 807 civilians. Look, don't get lost in the numbers. That's real human beings. Kids, aunts, uncles, moms. Just picture them as humans. The Atlantic did a great job here, wonderful piece of writing, in making it real. They said, look, for example, there's homegrown terrorists, like those guys in San Bernardino. Remember that couple that did the shooting? Imagine if they said, well, look, we're going to do a surgical and precise drone strike to take that guy out so he doesn't kill people inside America. That's even more dangerous than killing some guy in Yemen or Somalia that's our ally, right? So we did a drone strike on them, and don't worry, we got them, which, by the way, a lot of times they don't get them. But we also killed 13 of your kids in an elementary school nearby in that drone strike. Who would say yes to that? Nobody would, right? Well, that would be... Well, right. That would be grotesque and barbarian. But when we do it to their kids, we think, well, it's no big deal. I mean, that's 807 pieces of collateral damage. But then when they're also human. They also get really, really mad if you kill their kids. And so when that leads to that more people fighting against us, we shouldn't be surprised. And by the way, the war machine ticks on. And I'm not at all convinced that this is accidentally counterproductive. Mm-hmm. And so no matter who's president, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, what do the generals who are about to get millions of dollars from defense contractors come in and tell them? They say, oh, you need more drone strikes. You need to kill more people. And don't worry about civilians. Oh, we're so precise.
Yeah, I don't think you're right about that attitude, because I think that the Obama administration did give, as they said, what they considered exceptionally surgical and precise. And I think it's war, and you're dropping a bomb on a civilian population, and this is what's going to happen. So better would be for us to recognize, hey, you want to go kill terrorists in Yemen? You want to go kill them outside the accepted two wars that we're fighting, right? Then you're going to kill kids.
Yeah.
You're going to kill kids. And so I imagine that number, let's say it's 600, put it right in the middle. It's not 384, it's not 807. I'm sure it could have been 1,600. We dropped a lot of drones, and they're all huge bombs, right? And it's not always on a convoy in the middle of the desert, totally by itself.
Okay, so another way of looking at this is that those drone strikes from Obama killed at least 128 times more innocent people than the Boston Marathon bombing. 128 times.
That's why, it's why it's valuable. It's not just valuable, it's critical that we see battlefield footage from, and that we see dead Americans, that we see Americans killed in action. I've seen 38 minutes of Ken Burns' Vietnam documentary, and it's already amazing. Mostly because who's in it are Vietnamese, right? And it becomes very easy when it's the other. And for me too, and we're all experiencing it with the hurricane, right? I mean, it tears through St. Martin and destroys St. Martin, and then lawlessness reigns on St. Martin because there is no law. The world has essentially been wiped out, right? And we don't, it's hard to care, right? But if it hits Florida, we care. We're having a tough time caring about Puerto Rico. I've already had 6 conversations with people where I remind them that Puerto Rico's in the U.S., and I'm not exempting myself from it. I don't feel the same way, right? And that bothers me, right? And those are Americans. So when it's other people, when it's other kids, when it's Yemeni kids, well, they're surrounded by terrorists, and the real people to blame are the terrorists who are essentially using human shields, and they're using Yemen as a base, and all of that is true. But we still did it. And the question is, did we win? Are we made safer? And is the world made safer long term by doing this? There are very serious people whose voices are at least heard now who argue now, no, that this actually makes us and the world and perhaps Yemen less safe. And last thing, we wouldn't do it. The thing about drones, it's a little unfair to say he used it 10 times more than George W. Bush. He also used it 1,000,000,000% more than Bill Clinton and Ronald Reagan. Now it's easy, right? We press a button and the drone strikes can be done so easily, and we don't have to send in troops. So, man, it is totally antiseptic. We feel good, and we don't want to send troops. We don't want to send 5,000 American commandos into Yemen where people are going to shoot at them, and then we know it's messy. Here, man.
I don't even think, but I also don't want to fight some other country's war, which is what we're doing in Yemen right now, right? We're in Yemen doing these drone strikes for Saudi Arabia. And I don't think most Americans know that. What they do is they, lie to the American people about how there's a terroristic. I don't even think most Americans know what we're doing in Yemen, right?
That's the truest thing anyone's ever said.
And so that is just, it's criminal. It's criminal. Like we're killing innocent individuals in a country that most Americans don't even know that we're doing drone strikes on. We're using our resources to do so. it's so frustrating, and it just continues on. And I'm with you, Cenk. I don't think that this is an accident. I feel like things are intentionally escalated because there's a profit motive behind it.
So, look, last couple of things here. One of the things we warned about during the Obama administration is if you open a door, the next president can walk right through it. So the door that Obama opened with the drone strikes and killing civilians was already bad enough. You didn't need anyone else to walk through it. It wasn't like, oh, someone else can abuse it. Obama abused it. And there I have a little disagreement with Ben there. I don't think they were very careful at all. They would do signature strikes where they didn't even know who they were bombing. Hey, fool me once, shame on you. I mean, I don't want to get back into the Bush quotes, but in terms of Obama, if his guys come in and go, Mr. President, we're incredibly careful. Oh, oops, sorry, we killed 17 kids. The next time, they say it again and again and again. And maybe the fourth time, you go, hey, you know what? I'm getting the sense you guys aren't that careful. And the 600th civilian killed on your watch, I'm getting the sense you guys are not that careful. So I blame Obama completely for that. Now, of course, you have Trump, who's a monster, who doesn't care at all. So he's like, thank you so much. Rare actual thanks, Obama, for opening that door. I'm now going to fly through it and just take and say, if they were careful, which they weren't, I don't want you to be careful at all. Go nuts. Do more drone strikes. Don't even vet them. I mean, to say we're not even going to vet them is unbelievable.
What we do know, here's what we know. And I don't disagree with you at all, really, on who bears responsibility for the 400 to 800 civilians killed under the Obama administration. It's Obama, and you just have to prioritize whether it was worth it. Was it worth it fighting Saudi Arabia's war?
Hell no.
Right. So obviously, some people think so. What I am objecting to is the characterization that the people doing it don't care. I don't know whether they care. I have no idea. I imagine that they do, and almost to me, worse is that they care, and they still make an assessment that this is the kind of country we want, that this is still better.
So I just want to quickly reply to what you said, because I wish I knew that the conversation would go in this direction, because I'd have the article in front of me. But several years ago, The Intercept had this incredible expose regarding drone strikes abroad and the type of intelligence that the Defense Department relies on in order to give the green light for these drone strikes. And time again, that article exposed that they would rely on what they knew was faulty intel. And so they would rely on cell phone GPS, and it turns out that it was a cell phone that actually belonged to a completely innocent person. Drop the drone strike on that person. And so, and by the way, they would be alerted to these issues, and they completely ignored them. And so, again, The Intercept reported this several years ago. I'm going to look for the story and tweet it out, but it was definitely illuminating. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to stop if we genuinely care about, stopping terrorism.
Part of the way that they keep count is body count. And so, hey, we killed X number of terrorists. Are they actually terrorists? Well, maybe we got the wrong GPS, maybe we got the wrong cell phone, or maybe we got the right cell phone, but he'd handed it to his mom.
Well, I'm just curious, since how many jihadists did we kill? These drone strikes.
Yeah, all the numbers are completely unreliable.
But then ultimately, you as a country make that assessment. Suppose it's 8,000.
There's no way it was 8,000.
Okay, suppose it's 5,000.
Okay.
But whatever, pick a number. 4,000. 400 civilians, 4,000. Are we comfortable killing 10 jihad? Right. So I mean, that's the conversation that you want us to have as a country. But because we don't see it, we don't see dead Americans. We don't see Americans put in harm's way. We certainly don't see dead civilians that Americans kill. For some reason, with this free media that we have, with an unchecked media, we don't see it. I think it would change it if we saw it. We have made war and death totally antiseptic in this country, and it is a huge mistake. And drone warfare is antiseptic for us, not for them.
I mean, think about it. We will put someone in solitary confinement for who knows how long if they have the audacity to leak footage of us, bombing innocent people, or bombing people in general. So,
but actually bombing innocent people, gets you nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to take another break, guys. We'll be right back. We have more amazing stories for you guys, including Facebook's admission that, oops, yeah, the Russians bought ads all over us, and What you do about that, though, is a much harder question. Let's tackle that when we come back.
Weakness is a harmonic.
Young Turks, Jank Banana with you guys. Jasmine Desi 16 says, I agree 100% with Anna and Ben. I assume that's on the travel ban story. I see you, Jasmine. I see what you're saying. Okay. Edward says, so they want to save us from terrorists so we can die from no health care. Okay, good point. Adrian Munoz says, TYT for the win at the Streamies. Thank you, but remember to include hashtag TYT for Streamies. Okay, that's FOR. TYT for Streamies. So that counts as a vote. Retweets of that also counts as a vote. So we can win Show of the Year, the best show on the internet. That would be amazing. Jenny Dennis Saxena says, decade after decade, we fight the enemy we made in the last covert action. Only the military-industrial complex benefits.
Yep.
It's great points. And the members of the day are Ben Smith and Paul Eastwick. I think we had a wonderful post-game yesterday where I told insane Uber stories. Mm-hmm. Did I deliver on those stories?
You did. Yes. One of them was particularly insane. Yeah.
Yes. So check that out if you're a member. Of course, members have access to all the archives, all the shows, all the post games, all the old schools, etc. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. Okay, go ahead, Anna.
All right. Hurricane Maria has left complete and utter devastation in Puerto Rico, and so far we have learned that 6 people have lost their lives as a result. Authorities are expecting the number to increase as the recovery efforts move forward. However, the deaths have been caused by a variety of issues related to the storm, including mudslides and severe flooding. Now, authorities have been hampered in their ability to assess damage because foul weather continues to batter parts of the island, as well as the fact that the storm knocked out power and communication systems across the island. There are also reports that there is a bridge that's expected to collapse, and as a result, more than 70,000 people have been evacuated from the town that they live in, or they are in the process of being evacuated. Just to give you some more information, officials warn residents that it could actually be months before power is restored. Months. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So things are not good in Puerto Rico, and it's really devastating, especially when you consider, the state that Puerto Rico was already in with its economic crisis.
And the fact that several different hurricanes have hit the Caribbean already. Look, I was just in Miami, and it got grazed, and it was still a mess. And Puerto Rico had gotten hit by some of the other storms, but this one hit it full on.
Storm that full on hit Puerto Rico, I think, since 1932.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the worst storm in 80 years for Puerto Rico. I think we got some video of what's happened here. To me, the things that are amazing are it lifted and ripped the roofs off of not just homes, but some giant shopping centers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to my friends in New York who had lived through Superstorm Sandy, and that was just 50-mile-per-hour winds. And they said it was ferocious. And these were 160-mile-hour winds. So this is Mother Nature sending a message. And it's not because it's intended and it's conscious. It's just, hey, this is storms getting more severe. This is what happens when the water is warmer and the weather is warmer. You have more precipitation, more severe storms, and now it's moving on to the Bahamas where they think it might dump 20 inches of rain.
So I wanted to quickly clarify a statement that I made earlier because I misspoke. When I said that a bridge was going to collapse, it's actually a dam that's expected to collapse. So to be more specific, it's the Oaxaca Dam, and they're expecting it to fail, which is prompting these mass evacuations from the area just to ensure that people don't die from extreme flooding. It's a 345-yard dam that holds back a man-made lake covering about 2 square miles and was built decades ago.
So a bridge collapsing is disastrous. A dam collapsing is worse.
Way worse, yeah.
The Rush Limbaughs of the world, if it doesn't hit his exact house at 160 miles per hour, thinks it didn't happen. Well, the people of Puerto Rico know it's happening.
Yeah, and I just think it's strange that, and again, I hold myself responsible for this a little, that unless it hits the U.S. mainland, that we somehow, I'm bothered that I don't care as much about, that there's an earthquake in Mexico. It collapsed the school. It's not that I don't care as much, but we're conditioned to care about the things that are closest to us. I mean, for crying out loud, an earthquake hits in Mexico. We live in Los Angeles. We live on a fault line, and an earthquake could hit here. And we all of us, I include myself, we got to think more globally. And the Puerto Ricans are Americans. They're our literal American brothers. And you're talking about months of no electricity on an entire island, and there's going to be a breakdown of societal order there. So if you can give, and I've given, and if you can give.
Yeah, and in the earthquake in Mexico, man, I was reading the story of the schools that had collapsed, and parents waiting all night, and they're pulling out one dead kid after another, and then they pulled out 3 kids who were alive. And Jesus, man. And so it's just harrowing, but it's an unfortunate part of humanity that we care more as it gets closer to us. Look at what's happening in Myanmar.
It relates to what we were just talking about in Yemen, of why this is an easier story for many Americans that we killed between 400 and 800 Yemeni civilians, because they're so unlike us, even though, of course, they're not. There's nothing. They're in fact almost exactly like us.
Yeah, and so you got the Rohingya Muslims. Hundreds of thousands have been, driven out of the country. Hundreds butchered, burned alive. I mean, if ISIS had done that to Europeans or Americans,
even Yazidis, right?
Or even Yazidis, right, we would have invaded and bombed and etc. But when it happens halfway across the world and it happens to people we can't relate to, it's gotten almost. I mean, look, the media's covered a little bit. The U.S. government reaction has been a deafening silence.
Yeah, and that's been true, of course, for Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, for and of course the ISIS and killing Yazidis, and we in general we were taught to care more about that because we've been conditioned to believe that ISIS poses an immediate threat to us, right? Yeah. Whereas what's happening to Rohingya Muslims doesn't, and what's happening in Yemen, again, the theory is it's our war on terror, so whatever's happening that's terrible, but it's making us safer. And that's just a thing we think and say and are conditioned to say because we want to normalize the most horrible things in the world. We have to, and we can't react to the Mexican quake and the devastation in Puerto Rico. I don't have the emotional capacity to. I assume most people don't, to really feel it as it probably ought to be felt. But we don't feel it. We don't. Again, and I'm just bothered by it. I know what you say is true, that as it gets closer to us, we're conditioned where it's not enough for me to stop there. I know I'm part of it because I have the exact same, I'm conditioned the exact same way, but it should not be that way. It shouldn't be that way.
And finally, look, guys, you should help in all these different situations in any way that you can. But there's almost nothing you can do about an earthquake. So there's the after the fact helping, donating, etc., which you should definitely do. But before the fact, there is something that, people will say we can do about terrorism. Fair enough, and I hope we have a smart strategy for that. We haven't had one yet, but I hope we have one. But there's also something we can do about climate change. It makes the storms more severe. So we have to make sure that the planet doesn't heat up. Because as devastating as all of these hurricanes hitting all at once have been, it's still an appetizer for what's to come. And that is not a situation that is going to be pretty for anybody, and no one is going to be safe, no matter where they are in the world.
All right, we got to take a final break. Let's do that, and when we come back, Facebook and some drama involving Russian trolls advertising on its platform.
back on the Young Turks. Cenk, Ben, and Anna with you guys in the middle of a banana hour or 2 banana hours. All right, what else we got, Anna?
All right. Through an internal investigation, executives at Facebook found that there were as many as 470 Russia-linked accounts that had bought 3,000 Facebook ads in order to have some influence over this past election. Most of these ads were pro-Trump, anti-Hillary, and now Facebook has decided to participate in investigations. They have turned over this data to Robert Mueller as he continues his investigation on Russian collusion. And it's interesting because I think that they are now participating in this investigation and cooperating with Congress with all the data that they're requesting, because Congress is now thinking about passing regulations pertaining to social media and political ads on social media. Now, keep in mind that when it comes to television, the FEC gets involved and they ensure that these political ads clearly state who the person or people behind them are. So they have to clearly state who the sponsor is for those ads. That is not true of social media and political ads on those platforms. And so now politicians are thinking, primarily Democratic politicians, are thinking about drafting legislation that would make that mandatory, among other regulations.
Well, I don't understand, Anna. I was told by some that there's no evidence that Russia meddled. There's no evidence. Well, oops. Turns out there is evidence.
Yeah.
So
Russian meddling, it is not an issue. It is so obvious, and the hesitancy of some on the left to just fully embrace the obviousness of Russian. They do it all the time, and they were bold enough to do it.
How dare you?
Right, and so
I guess you want World War III with Russia.
Right, that's right. I war. This is just like the people who say that this is just that this is a Red Scare and it's just like the McCarthy hearings have not read 2 sentences about the McCarthy hearings. I don't know what evidence there is that Trump knew about it or orchestrated it. I have no idea. That may never be anything. But they definitely tried to influence the election, and it would appear to succeed.
Right. And so I think people get very uncomfortable once you start talking about they succeeded. They wanted to influence the election, they succeeded. Because, to blame all of it on Russia, I think, just rubs people the wrong way. There were a number of factors that led to this unfortunate outcome of the election, right?
Can I just settle that for once and for all? So
believe me, it's not going to settle it for once and for all.
Once I say it, it'll be done.
Okay.
Okay.
You're going to solve it.
I'm solving it right now. Okay, because guys, both the 2 different camps there are driving me crazy. So, did Russia swing the election? It was 78,000 votes in 3 different states. 39,000 going in the opposite direction results in a different president. So, almost everything swung the election. The weather swung the election. The Russians did. Facebook did. And not putting Bernie on the ticket did. Not putting Bernie at the top of the ticket did. I mean, every single thing mattered. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean it's the only thing that mattered, right? So both sides who are seeing in some weird black and white things, no, none of it mattered, none of it mattered. Don't be ridiculous. On the other hand, the people are like, since Russia mattered, it's the only thing that mattered. No, she also ran a terrible campaign that mattered more. But this clearly also mattered.
Sure.
Right.
I will say that's unquestionably true. We've discussed that and agreed from the start on that. There's no doubt. However, one of those things is really not like the other. 2 of those things. Comey and the Russians. The other things are politics, right? I mean, it's true that the things that she did well in the campaign, she didn't get credit for it because it was her, whatever. That's politics, right? That was picking the wrong candidate at the wrong time, I think, despite her qualifications. So, Bernie, that's politics, man. The guy ran against her. Did he support her enough? I don't know. Seemed to support her a lot. More of Bernie's voters voted for her than Hillary's voters voted for Obama in 2008. That's an incontrovertible fact, right? So that's what happens. Sometimes the losing candidate's voters never vote for the person at the top of the ticket because they're best. So, those things are politics. The world's other great power, putting its resources into choosing one person over another and tricking us into thinking they weren't doing it subtly, and the involvement of Comey at 10 days before the election, those were very strange abnormal factors. So it's okay with me if we focus on those a little bit more. But that said, the notion that those are the only things that swung the election that was determined by a swing of 39,000 votes, undoubtedly, all those things that.
But let me just say real quick though, look, but there's going to be curveballs in an election. You need the candidate to get past those curveballs.
That's right.
I would put Comey in the curveball category. Russia's in a slightly different category because that's a different state influencing our elections. I know that we as America have done that countless times abroad as well. We shouldn't do it. Russia shouldn't do it. But since it's our country and it's our democracy that they're meddling with, there should be consequences. No, not war. Calm down. Okay. Right? But at the same time, for our government to go, oh, you helped to swing our election by illegally spending money in our elections and clearly supporting one candidate over the other. Whatever.
I'm going to check.
Okay, so I just
that's unacceptable.
Real quick, I maybe I'm the bad guy because I don't really care too much about consequences for Russia. First of all, I 100% do not want to go to war with Russia.
Nobody does.
No one wants to go to war with Russia. And anyone who says like, oh, they're just like fear mongering to head in that direction, you're wrong. That's not what's happening. What I care about more than anything is what are we going to do as a country to prevent it in the future, right? We're going to do sanctions with Russia, fine, whatever. Again, maybe I'm the bad guy, but I don't really care. I care way more about finding where our weaknesses are and preventing it from happening again in the future, right? Because social media is still relatively new and it is unregulated. And so now there's talk about regulation. And I think that, that starts entering some scary territory, but obviously something needs to be done. And I don't care if it's, something that's positively impacting Democrats and negatively impacting Republicans. I still don't think it's right. You don't want a foreign country to have any influence or any say over our election or politics.
Also, it's Russia. It's Putin. It was sinister. Like, it's not like the French were like, I want this election to be the fairest one America has. How do we do that? Right? It was in Canada being like, what can we do to help? Right? How can we exert? So it was nefarious. But Anna, screw you and you're looking to the future. That's inappropriate. So real quick, can I say something before? Yeah, so I agree with Anna totally. That's obviously how we should be approaching this sanction. I don't care I don't know. What we do with Russia is a more consequential question for later. It's not war and it's not messing with their election. Right?
Right.
But to your Comey was a curveball. It's more than a curveball. It's like they threw a fastball and they threw it from 40 feet. Like, it was that kind of thing never happens that close, right? It just doesn't. Yes, it was technically because he was part of the government and there was an investigation. You could make an argument that it was a curveball, but it really wasn't a curveball. The umpires were robots, and they were like, no matter what the pitch was, it was a strike. It was in the dirt. Right?
Yeah, and that's much worse. So last thing on this is to just further support what Anna's saying. Look, some regulations around the internet, government meddling, and by the way, big time supported by TV, who hates the internet and views it as competition. They're ecstatic about the story. They're like, yes, regulate Facebook and the others. Mm-hmm. I'm a little worried about that. Could you do some stuff around the edges? Like Facebook has hired 250 people to track this. That's good. They've kicked out the 470 fake Russian accounts. That's good. By the way, they were almost all, from what we can see in the press so far, pro-Trump. So if you followed being patriotic, secured borders, or all these other things, and you thought you were being patriotic, you were actually getting used as a tool of our enemies. So nice job, right-wingers. You are as stupid as you look. Okay, and now, so some regulations around the edges, okay, that's fine. But the main thing that our government has to do is to make sure they cannot hack the vote. Because they did try. In this election, that's a way bigger story. They tried to infiltrate voter databases, and they did. They didn't hack the vote as far as we know, but they infiltrated the voter databases in several states.
In the 30s, right?
Yeah, and if they're close to doing that last time around, they're going to only get better next time around. And for Trump administration, who claims that they care about voter fraud, but then is doing nothing about Russia possibly hacking into our voter files and doing mass voter fraud to steal elections. That is unconscionable. So
I know, but why would he, Jake? Think about it. Why would he? He's already this insecure little guy. Like, that's the way I see him. He's incredibly insecure, which is why he's constantly talking about crowd sizes. He's constantly talking about how popular he is and how much everyone loves him. He's insecure. So in his eyes, acknowledging Russian involvement delegitimizes this past election. And he's so insecure about that, he's not going to do anything about Russia.
No, I know. But and by the way, since they're supporting him, he thinks, well, maybe they'll help steal the next election for me. So this guy is not on our side. And so two things that are absolutely clear from that. When Donald Trump talks about voter fraud, he is a total fraud, complete liar. All it is to make sure people who are more likely to be Democratic, like African American voters, students, etc., cannot vote. They don't care about voter fraud at all. If they did, they'd be going ballistic to make sure the Russians are not hacking our elections. And then finally, Trump tweeted, "The Russia hoax continues. Now it's on Facebook. What about the totally biased and dishonest media coverage in favor of crooked Hillary?" In other words, the guy who attacks everyone, bullies everyone, Democrats, Republicans, the media, the one guy he won't touch is Vladimir Putin. Do you think that's a coincidence? And when there's evidence that the Russians did meddle in our elections, she's like, it's a hoax! It's a hoax! Whatever you do, don't say anything about Putin! Don't say anything about... You think he's not involved? Look, we need a smoking gun. I hope Mueller finds it. But this guy thinks the Russians did it and can't wait to cover it up. Yeah, the only people who can't see that are the ones that are just absolutely blinded by partisanship. Okay, well, now we're in a weird situation. Okay, we got a couple of minutes left here, but let me just give you a quick poll, and then I want to take a quick break, and I know we'll lose the Sirius Satellite audience at that, but let's stay on and just do two more stories for the online audience at TYTnetwork.com. When asked, Americans said 54% said that Russia-backed content on social media did move the 2016 election. Now, you don't need a poll to show that. It either did or it didn't, and whether Americans think it did is not determinative of whether it did. But at least it's a majority of the country saying, yeah, of course it won the elections. And so I think people are there on that.
How many say it didn't?
It is mainly Republicans, of course, and 43% say that no, that it's not too or at all likely that it made a difference. So 54 to 43, 82% of Democrats think it made a difference. Only 15% of Republicans.
Nobody said anything about math. I mean, because to that point, if they did it, anything made a difference. Any little thing could have made a difference.
That's right. All right. So anyway, if you're at Sirius Satellite Radio or you're watching or listening anywhere else, if you want to get the whole show, God bless your heart, go become a member, tytnetwork.com/join, and you get the whole show commercial free. We're trying to provide a service for you guys there. Think of it kind of like the HBO of news, and you get all of our shows, including Aggressive Progressive, Old School, all of our post games, where we talked about those hilarious Uber stories and my arrest story, which was also interesting, etc. So do that. And then lastly, I started the show talking about the shirts, but we do have some fun shirts. So go to shoptyt.com. And if it's not this one, it's okay. No, we don't have that one. No. Okay. Anyway, fly the colors, guys. Fly the colors. You wear Young Turks, you will run into people and they'll talk to you, and you'll be surprised at how many people you meet.
Just bump straight.
All right. For the online audience, we'll be right back. Young Turks. We have a couple of Comey-related stories that we really wanted to share with you guys.
Yes.
All right, so go for it, Anna.
All right. James Comey was giving a speech, or attempting to give a speech, at Howard University, and there were student protesters who didn't want to have anything to do with it. In fact, they wanted to do everything to stop it. Take a look.
And I love the enthusiasm of the young folks. I just wish they would understand what a conversation is. A conversation is where you speak and I listen, and then I speak and you listen, and we go back and forth and back and forth. At the end of a conversation, we're both for it.
Oh, he did manage to finish his speech, and keep in mind that he has been appointed by Howard University to serve as the chair in public policy for the 2017-2018 academic year. And so this raises the same question, the same issue that's been coming up quite a bit lately on college campuses, the issue of free speech. And in this case, he managed to finish his speech, but, the students were being very persistent in interrupting him and trying to prevent him from doing so.
I was a little surprised at this story because I don't know which way they're going to go on Comey, because Comey's such a complicated character.
Yeah.
So, yes, he might have cost the Democrats the election, as we've talked about many times, and as well as many other factors, including Hillary Clinton. But at the same time, he was pursuing Donald Trump and was fired for it. Or at least had begun to pursue Donald Trump. So I guess I was slightly surprised that they had this reaction. Although you can't beat the chant of "Get out, James Comey, you're not our homie."
You cannot. The chant. You know how I feel about chanting. That's a great chant.
Yeah, it's a great. Ben Mankiewicz, who's notoriously anti-chanting, approves of that chant.
I might have chanted that. It's really complicated because they have a right to protest the speech, but once a guy's giving a speech, you should let him give the speech, And
I don't think that part's that complicated, actually. So I didn't know which way they were going to go on Comey politically, but once you disagree with him, which is a perfectly fair thing to do, super, super fair. I think that the way I think it was Notre Dame students handled Mike Pence was better, where they made it clear that they were opposed to him. And they got up, and some walked out, and I think most turned their backs on him. So that allowed him to make his speech, but made a political point. Now, right-wingers get hurt no matter what. They think that they have a right to speak, and everyone must love what they say. That's just not how it works. But especially on a college campus, I think everybody should be allowed to speak. And so Pence got to finish his speech. Now, Comey did it anyway. He soldiered on, but I wouldn't have tried to, And another thing, I think they did it with Pence, I'm not positive, but the chant in the beginning, give it a couple of minutes, you make your point, you want to turn around, you want to walk out, you want to do all those things, great.
You want to boo him afterwards, or something, but
yeah. But after the first couple of minutes and you've done a fun chant, then let the guy speak. That's my take on it.
No, I think it's the right take. I mean, it's important, and there is supposed to, and college campuses are supposed to be, the idea that there should be a free exchange of ideas is important. And at college campuses, it's not really a First Amendment issue. Nobody's getting arrested. Nobody's going to prison. The government's not stopping anybody from speaking. But the free exchange of ideas, I think, at colleges is important.
Yeah.
And the notion that there are some on the left who are opposed to that, or it bothers me. No question that it bothers me.
So there are those on the left and the right who are opposed to that. And there was a pretty devastating study done by the Brookings Institution in regard to free speech on college campuses and how students feel about it. And this is so discouraging because it's worse than I thought, okay? The number of students who actually don't care that much about free speech, based on the results of this study, concerns me because a college campus is supposed to be a free marketplace of ideas, and it is a slippery slope. I hate slippery slope arguments, but if you start censoring speakers or banning speakers, first of all, no political party or political group should dictate what all the students get to hear on that campus, right? So if you're a liberal student and you hate these conservative speakers, I hear you, But not everyone on campus is liberal, and conservatives, should have the right to hear from people that they're interested in hearing from as well, and vice versa, right? So let me give you the details of this survey, because it's devastating. So a student group, so they asked a bunch of questions. Here's one of the questions that Brookings Institution asked. A student group opposed to the speaker disrupts the speech by loudly and repeatedly shouting so that the audience cannot hear the speaker. Do you agree or disagree that the student group's actions are acceptable? Well, here is a graph showing you the number of people who agree. So 51% of these students surveyed said that they agree, okay, the majority, not small majority.
It's okay to drown them out.
It's okay to drown them out and not allow the audience to hear this person's speech or message.
That's depressingly high.
That is depressingly high. Now, let's go back. Among students who identify as Democrats, the amount is 62% who think that this is okay. Among Republicans, it's 39%. Independents, 45%. When it comes to females, 47%. Males, surprisingly, 57%. So males are more likely than females to think that this type of behavior is acceptable. Okay, so let's go to the next question.
Okay, before we do, let's just note that, come on, Democrats, you're supposed to be better than that. So the right wing is more authoritarian, and usually authoritarian leads to shutting down opposition speech. Progressive is supposed to be more open-minded. And I get it, there's a lot of pent-up frustration about the right wing steamrolling progressives. Not necessarily progressives, but certainly the Democratic Party over the last couple of decades. But this is not the right way to fight back. And look, shutting down other people's opinions is always, in some way, an admission of defeat.
Yep.
And you should never admit that. So when fundamentalists use violence to strike out against others, so let's say a fundamentalist Muslim or wants to kill someone because they've insulted his religion, that just means he doesn't think he's right, and he can't debate with you, so he's resorting to violence rather than ideas. But shouting people down so they're not allowed to speak is a needless admission, like that you're almost not afraid of those ideas, but that you don't even want to allow it. It's just totally unnecessary. Just let them speak. They're deeply unpopular opinions. They're not going to get any traction. And you will easily defeat them in the battlefield of ideas. That's what progressivism is. So it's very disappointing that Democrats are more in favor of it than
Republicans. I don't know who they, and I wonder if they have, I hope they have somebody in mind, because I get why you would petition your school to disinvite a speaker, right? But the list of people who've been disinvited is too long. Like, there are people who I think you could take a stand and go, no, not at our school. If it's an official school invitation, if the Republican Party is inviting them, well, then you got to let them come. That's it. But, I could see protesting, I know you debated her, but I could see saying no to Ann Coulter.
Right.
But you can't say no to Ben Shapiro. You don't agree with Ben Shapiro, but you got to let the guy gets to speak. There's no question that he gets to speak.
I don't even care about having Ann Coulter.
Yeah,
Ann Coulter is deeply unpopular, right? Like, deeply unpopular. So let her go share her deeply unpopular ideas. Just yesterday, she was calling for death squads to go after immigrants. Like, she's a terrible, horrible person.
But
go ahead.
I think that to death squads to immigrants, I think if your college is inviting her, you can say, no, we don't have to give a platform to someone who calls for death squads to immigrants. That's too far. Nuking Muslim countries, that's too far, right? Conservatives, who I think have largely deeply popular ideas like Ben Shapiro, but he's got an argument, and you should hear him out. And if you want to have a counter protest, fine. But he gets to speak. I just mean there is some line. They can't invite anyone. If they said, where Heinrich Himmler's coming in to speak, right? You could say, no, we're not going to hear from Joseph Stalin. We're not going to hear from Himmler, right? I think to me that's okay.
But at the same time, it's a tough line to draw.
It is a tough line to draw, but
I
could draw it.
Here's the thing.
I'm the guy to draw it, yeah.
Here's another thing to keep in mind. Just because they're not going to go, let's say these students are successful and they stop who they consider an offensive speaker from speaking on their campus. That doesn't, brush the situation under the rug and that's it. That person can't spread their message anymore. They can and they will spread their message. In fact, some of the protests that went down in Berkeley only amplified their message.
That's right.
And so it's so counterproductive. I mean, look, I agree with where the students are coming from, right? I feel them, and it's frustrating. But at the same time, you got to think about a strategy that's actually productive and makes them look like clowns and makes you look like the good guy, not you looking like the bad guy, which is how these situations usually unravel. I think it would be more successful if you just completely ignore them. No one goes to their speeches except for the few people from whatever patriot organization is at Berkeley. And then how about you host a progressive speaker that's obviously going to attract a much larger crowd, right?
Yeah, or, and then show up afterwards and turn your back, whatever. There's plenty of symbolic gestures, but you gotta let the people. You basically have to let them speak.
So let me tell you how much, because it's not just Berkeley. This is affecting every campus, and it affects every speaker, every professor, if they're known to have any political ideology, right? Right now, in the department that I teach in, there's like nonstop ongoing discussions about First Amendment issues, right? So what do you do when a student walks into your classroom in the middle of your lecture and interrupts you because they don't like, something that you've done in the past, something that you've said in the past? Like, you have to now go through training and strategies in order to deal with these issues. And think about it, like, a lot of professors barely get paid anything. They're working like crazy, and it's a very selfless job, right? They're doing it because they love it. And so to add on to all of that stress, you have to worry about someone coming in and interrupting your class and trying to make it difficult for you to even get through your lecture. Like, it's insane.
Guys, I had conservative professors, I had liberal professors. It's okay. Look, I'm an agnostic. I have never, ever wanted to shut down a religious person from speaking because I have no fear at all that they're going to convince me or convince someone else. Like, no, but you don't get it. Jesus was born of a virgin. Okay, you can make that case all day long, 1,000 times over. It's never going to be true. I'm not threatened by it. Let them freaking speak. Okay, so, and by the way, at Berkeley, where they're doing that free speech week, there are now going to be counter speeches, and one of our hosts, Hassan Piker, is going to go.
No, let me jump in, because you guys should be aware of this, because this is exactly what they want. So, Milo Yiannopoulos, Ann Coulter, all the deplorable people that we know about, tried to do a free speech week at Berkeley. Berkeley was completely cooperating with them, but the student organization behind Free Speech Week did not meet the deadlines in order to have, the indoor event. So the administrators are like, look, you're not giving us enough time to make sure we have the proper, setup, the infrastructure, the cops necessary to keep the area secure. And unfortunately, we can't host it indoors anymore because you missed the deadline. You're going to have to host it outside. I get a press release today, and guess what that press release said? Because the student organization is fearful of Antifa, they have decided to move Free Speech Week off campus. No, they're not fearful of Antifa. They did not meet the deadlines, okay? But they twist the message and they make it seem like, these liberals are trying to stop them from speaking.
It's
so frustrating.
It's important that colleges have a free exchange of ideas. They do. And Milo and Ann, who else is going?
Nobody knows.
Okay.
They keep lying.
So those two people, look, man, if you got to have it off campus like that, that's actually kind of irrelevant. Here's what's not a problem. Here's what's not happening in America. Milo and Ann Coulter aren't being heard. I mean,
they're being heard.
They're being heard. They're being heard plenty, and they are in fact evidence that the First Amendment is working and working well. And if a school doesn't want to host them, they don't have to host them. And if a school invites them under the penumbra of the entire school to me rather than a specific organization in the school, I think students can say, no, we don't want that. And the school can react however they want, and then the people can go speak somewhere else. That's part of the exchange of ideas. Once they're coming, they get to speak.
And by the way, the reason they don't want to do it off campus, which could be just as effective, is because they want the money. So it's not just about free speech. They get paid for these speeches. So, anyway.
So let me give you a few more results from this survey. Here's another question posed to the respondents. Let's go to graphic 13. A student group opposed to the speaker uses violence to prevent the speaker from speaking. Do you agree or disagree that the student group's actions are acceptable? So here is a graph showing those who agree. Among all respondents, 19% think it's acceptable to use violence to stop this form of speech. Among Democrats, it's 20%. And, would you look at that? Among Republicans, it's 22%. Among independents, 16%, females 10%, males 30%.
I mean, women are the big winners in this poll. It's just, it's so obvious who answers yes to that. What kind of Neanderthal answers yes to that?
Unfortunately, 1/5 of the population, at least in these universities, the people that they asked. So that is 20% is a bad number, man. That's 20% of the willing to use violence. That is way too high. And unsurprisingly here, the right wing is willing to use violence a little bit more.
That's statistically insignificant.
Yeah, but it's a small number. I agree with you. The fact that progressives are anywhere near the right wing on the, willingness to use violence is outrageous. Well, yeah, that's right. The whole point of being a progressive is that you don't go in that direction.
God, college kids are. This is a bad poll for college kids.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what though. I think that part of what's happening here, guys, is that the folks have actually grabbed pitchforks.
Yeah.
And so this is exactly what we're trying to prevent. And I think that this is why I keep hammering the establishment. Because in their bubble, everything is wonderful. And they're not seeing these pitchforks. And we are. And they're right behind us. So we got to find a way to bring actual justice and equality to the country. Otherwise, this is going to go south, and it's going to go south pretty quickly. I mean, if that number moves from 20% to 40%, we're in a world of pain, and it then becomes a different country.
To that point, just about pitchforks and anger and the establishment maybe not getting that, Dave Weigel wrote a tweet today that I retweeted that I liked quite a bit. It includes favorability ratings for Bernie Sanders and for Lindsey Graham.
Oh, this ought to be great.
So for Bernie Sanders right now is at 57-33 favorable, right? Mm-hmm. And Lindsey Graham, who's admittedly far less known, and his numbers are he's at 56 unfavorable, 44 favorable, but he's also known a lot less, right? So, and then Weigel, while retweeting those numbers, wrote, in D.C., Lindsey Graham is the affable green room guy.
Yes.
And Bernie Sanders is a wild leftist, right?
Yeah. That's a great tweet by Dave.
And in the world, Bernie Sanders is enormously popular, and Lindsey Graham is unknown and unpopular.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to this day, when I go to New York and D.C., I just went to New York, and I talk to folks who are well-meaning, good guys. They still don't get it. Bernie's wild-eyed. Bernie's radical. No, dude, that 20% that's willing to use violence, that's radical.
Yeah, and also
Bernie is nowhere near radical.
And it's so, I mean, you don't have to have taken a bunch of government classes and spent your life studying politics to know that, and the 17 Democrats who've come out for single payer, right? We're not about to get single payer. We're obviously not getting single payer in the Trump administration, right? That's patently obvious. He wouldn't sign it. Although who knows, it's him, actually.
Yeah.
But if Democrats were to win the Senate and the House, but he's not going to pay. But this is how that process works. And then when there's a negotiation, when there's another president, the negotiation includes a bunch of people arguing for single payer, and the negotiation is made over here. Yeah. And then who knows? In 20 years or 2 years, we may have it. It's not crazy. This is how you change that. This is how you get everybody covered.
Yeah, it's just, man, sometimes I gotta say, man, that I can't stand Washington. The fact that they like Lindsey Graham and think that he's more representative of the American people, despite all available evidence than Bernie Sanders, it's just fucking gross. And it's what's gonna lead to bad things. They are so out of whack with the rest of the country. Alright, anyways, we gotta go, guys. Today in the postgame, by the way, we have a heartwarming story of a TYT romance. Ooh, TYTnetwork.com/join. Okay, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.